here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. As we return to my conversation with Robert Kennedy, the environmental lawyer, and Bill Haney, the film director who premiered Last Mountain at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah. Bill Haney.
60% of the profits to themselves, and it's difficult to justify the environmental devastation. It's that it says it's all about jobs. But in reality, all the economic studies show that West Virginia, for every dollar of benefit from the coal industry, localized benefit, they spend $5. The same study's been done in Kentucky, had the same result. We're beginning a transition, so there's more natural gas jobs in West Virginia than there are coal jobs already, and there's more wind jobs in America today than there are coal jobs. So the notion that we can't move into renewables in a way that actually promotes job growth, progressive, thoughtful job growth, is absurd. And it's just part of a long set of disinformation campaigns that the coal industry practices, starting with the idea that there's such a thing as clean coal, which is a farce, and all the way back to the notion that they're actually involved in creating sustainable jobs in a long-term way, when in fact they're investing in massive explosives to get rid of jobs. That is part of distracting the public from the simple issues, which are that the coal industry is 50% of the electricity in the country, 50% of the rail traffic in the country, but broadly defined spending $1.5 billion every 10 years to make friends with politicians who will distort the regulatory and legal process to support them.
So we're talking the coal industry, a powerhouse in lobbying, yes, trains, and utilities.
And the utilities have become a small number of utilities, which are coal-burning plants, have become unbelievably profitable because when the environmental standards were passed in the 70s, old plants, which were presumed to be going out of business soon, were exempt from complying with wide pieces of the Clean Air Act, and then as a result became wildly more profitable and have been kept going for 50 years as a result. And so enormous pieces of the arsenic that's dumped into American families, the lead emissions that we pick up, the mercury that's contaminating riverways across the country, the carbon dioxide emissions, sulfur, nitrous oxide, ground level ozone is coming out of this small number of coal-fired power plants, which are spending enormous money to prevent themselves from being regulated in a way that would force them to be on a level playing field with solar plants or wind power plants or geothermal plants, and therefore lose.
What about the power of the politicians in West Virginia? For example, Joe Manchin, and you feature him in the film, who was the governor, now the senator of West Virginia.
It's a fascinating thing that even in the state of West Virginia, the politicians aren't listening to the public. Even in West Virginia, with its long history of connection to the coal industry, and with the long history of the coal industry trying to wrap the flag of patriotism around the coal industry. So when I go to a coal industry rally to film, and I look like a progressive filmmaker, what everybody's being given is a bumper sticker saying, "I love coal," and a flag. And the guy says to me, as I walk up, he goes, "Well, you wouldn't want these." And I said, "Well, I'd like the flag." But they don't give out the flag without the coal mining sticker. So 2/3 of the people in the state of West Virginia, as presently polled, are against mountaintop mining. So even within the state, the politicians are allowing the tyranny of the minority to actually overwhelm the democratic process.
And, I'm thinking about John Grisham's remarkable book, The Appeal, which is based on the story of the buying of judges. Bobby Kennedy, what about judges in West Virginia, Massey Energy?
Well, again, you have virtually, all of the political figures in the state who appear to have been corrupted by the industry. Now, I'm a practicing attorney, and I practice in front of the bar in West Virginia, and there's ethical standards that prohibit attorneys from impugning sitting judges, but the Supreme Court itself has said, the United States Supreme Court has, in one of the few times in its history, remanded a case to the state of West Virginia because the appearance of corruption by West Virginia judges, particularly by Massey Coal's influence on West Virginia judge. And in one case, one of the Supreme Court justices, Justice Benjamin, was the beneficiary of $3 million of private money spent by Massey CEO Don Blankenship to defeat his opponent, who had ruled against Don Blankenship in a dispute with another coal company. Blankenship then appealed in front of the judge that his money had helped elected and got that case reversed. Shortly during the pendency of that case, Judge Don Blankenship, again, the CEO of Massey, was photographed on the French Riviera on vacation with Justice Spike Maynard, who was another justice of the West Virginia Supreme Court, who was also hearing that case. So there's at least a strong, strong appearance of impropriety even within the judiciary.
How is this legal?
West Virginia.
I mean, isn't there something called conflict of interest?
Well, there's conflict of interest. The problem, what we see in the state of West Virginia is all of the democratic safeguards have been eroded. The press doesn't do its job in West Virginia. The press essentially consistently publishes the talking points for the industry. The industry is so powerful in the state and has been able to persuade many people in the state, even people who aren't directly getting money from the industry, that the industry is vital to the future of West Virginia. And one of the things that they've been able to do, and one of the conflicts that you see in this film is the local people at Coal Mountain want to build a wind farm. The wind farm will bring in $1.6 or $1.5 million in tax revenue to their county every year. If they cut down the mountains, you can't build a wind farm because the wind is up on top of these mountains. If they cut down the mountains, the coal industry for 6 years will get $30,000 a year, give $30,000 a year in taxes, create almost no jobs locally. The wind farms will create large amounts of job and permanently forever give $1.5 million in taxes. So West Virginia has a lot of alternatives. The problem is the coal industry has consistently and systematically blocked other types of economic development from coming into the state so that they can say to the people and to the press of the state, we are your only alternative. The only thing a West Virginian can do to make money is to work for us and our coal mines, and you're not even going to have a union to protect you. And in fact, mountaintop removal coal mining is compatible with any other kind of economic development. Nobody's going to move their business to a coal field when there are explosives going off that's showering toxic dust onto your business, where you have the explosive power every week in the coal fields of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky that is the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week, that shake the earth, that break the foundation, shatter the foundations of these rivers, that cause cracks in the earth to appear, that dry up the rivers, that poison the water. Who wants to move to a state where that kind of stuff is going on? Of course, no business is going to do it. West Virginia is ideally located. It's one of the most beautiful spots on earth, and certainly in this country. But it hasn't been able to attract other businesses, and it's mainly because of big coal.
You have a segment of the film with Joe Manchin. Explain what was going on. Then he was the governor.
Well, there's two pieces. I mean, we actually try to give the head of the West Virginia Coal Association an ample opportunity to explain their point of view, and I think I've reflected it fairly to you here. And Governor Manchin professes with enthusiasm in a big public setting that he is a friend of coal and that he can't imagine how anybody could not be a friend of coal. And then we watch as the locals come to protest. For example, the coal industry, when you mine the coal, you have to wash it, and the washing is take some of the toxins out, so you ship the hydrocarbons to the power plants. The three biggest dams in our hemisphere, Hoover, Ixtapa Falls, and Brushy Fork in West Virginia, holding 9.8 billion gallons of toxic metal sludge left over from coal washing, and one of 300 of these pits all over West Virginia. One of these pits hovers above an elementary school. And so in our film, a grandfather who was a coal miner for Massey, and his granddaughter lives next to this coal platform and is getting really sick, and they're worried that this leaking dam could come down and wipe these kids out, and these dams have broken before. He goes to the governor, and the governor says, meets him and glad hands him, and then says, I'll work on it, I'll do the best I can. And he says, well, what does that actually mean? I've been here 3 times over 5 years. And the guy says, well, whatever the best I can, I'm going to do that. And he moves to get himself posed in the picture. And we then go to see him talking to the environmental regulators in the state. So we discussed the federal EPA creates laws and regulatory standards, and the state is supposed to enforce them. And we see him talking to the DEP officials, and he says, so the way we want to work this is, you go out and talk to a business. If you find a violation, give them some suggestions and see if you can make it back sometime. And if it looks like they're thinking about it or they're trying, well, that's good enough. I mean, they don't have to actually do it. They just have to talk about doing it. So Governor Manchin, appears to be, well connected to the coal industry, enthusiastic about supporting it, and less concerned about the needs of some of the people in the state. And as you say, he's now a senator, and he became elected senator, one of the, in a close race. And the most important campaign piece he had was him firing a rifle shot into the cap and trade legislation. So that you saw environmental standards, progressive environmental standards, being blown apart in a militaristic display by the governor of the state of West Virginia.
And now talk about the new governor.
And the new governor doesn't seem to be any different. He has just called, even in the wake of this horrible tale in Tucson, with national calls to tamp down the inflamed language that many think contributed to that tragedy. He's just called for, there's a call to arms in West Virginia to bring the coal miners up to face and to rally against people who are suggesting environmental standards ought to be thoughtfully applied to them. And I will say some of the activists, including, for example, the waitress who is at the core of our story, made an appeal to the audience yesterday, or 2 days ago, saying, she hopes people will write their congressman because, frankly, she thinks people will be killed during these rallies, and she thinks she might be one of them.
This is Governor Tomblin.
This is Governor Tomblin. So the atmosphere of conflict, when you have a period of economic vulnerability, you're talking to miners' families and you're telling them the only way you can make a living is mining. This woman right here is trying to stop you from mining and taking care of your children, and we have a call to arms against her. That is certainly an inflamed environment.
And speaking of kids, let's go to another clip in The Last Mountain. This is Bobby Kennedy.
I have 3 sons who have asthma. We know that asthma attacks are caused by bad air, by ozone and particulates, and the principal source of those materials in our atmosphere are hundreds of coal-burning power plants that are burning coal illegally. It's been illegal for 18 years. Under the Clean Air Act, they were supposed to remove those materials from their emissions 18 years ago. But in states where corporations can easily dominate the state political landscapes, they were not required to comply with the law. So there's hundreds of them that are violating this critical law. But this is an industry that donated enormous amounts to President Bush during the 2000 cycle. And one of the first things that the Bush administration did when it came into office was to abolish the new source rule. This was the most important rule in the entire Clean Air Act. It is the heart and soul of that statute. And that's the rule that required those coal-burning power plants to clean up their emissions 18 years ago. So now I'm going to be able to watch my children gasping for air on bad air days because somebody gave money to a politician.
That's Bobby Kennedy talking about his children having asthma. Talk more about it. Bobby's right here with us.
Well, 3 of my sons have asthma. The single greatest trigger for asthma attacks is ozone and particulates that are emitted from coal-burning power plants. There are, according to EPA, between 20,000 and 60,000 Americans die every year as the result of ozone and particulates from coal-burning power plants. That's 30 times the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attacks. But year after year after year, 1 million asthma attacks, 1 million lost work days every year. That's one of the costs of coal that they don't tell you about when they say that coal only costs 11 cents a kilowatt hour.
Robert Kennedy and Bill Haney. Bill Haney's film is called The Last Mountain, focusing on Robert Kennedy and environmental activists in West Virginia about mountaintop removal. For the full conversation, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. We were speaking at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah. The film will open around the country in June.